minute.
Hi, everyone. It's time. You see, the clock has struck 1 in Central Time, USA. So, welcome, everyone, to today's live stream. I am so excited to be here with all of you. And last night, we also had the live stream. A lot of great work got done. So, what we're going to do today is a basic structure as yesterday, prayer of gratitude, followed by a description of what is energy healing, hoping to be just a little more orderly and concise about that, especially because we've got a lot of new people joining us. And then a little recap of the work from yesterday, and then we'll take off into today's session. Thank you to the source of creation for being all that is, for being the capacity of consciousness to heal, and for the beautiful, ancient, eternal wisdom which forms the bridge between that silent, unmanifest source of creation and this whole manifest realm of creation. Thank you to everyone who's here, to your ancestors, to our ability to work concisely and efficiently. Today we're addressing healings for the coronavirus, and we want to go right into the seed or core of that imbalance and address it with consciousness in the most effective, the most profound, the most useful, highest and best possible way. As we're doing that, we go back and forth between direct experience of applying consciousness to the field and creating changes, and intellectual understanding. That's my job, is I tell you what's going on, or I tell you what it looks like from my perspective. And then you have to compare and contrast to your perspective. But we're really doing this together. So we go back and forth between direct experience of the movements and the changes and the transformations that are taking place in the field of consciousness to understanding what those changes are, back and forth, back and forth. And as we go back and forth on those two phases of integrating understanding, that knowledge of how to directly engage with energy healing stabilizes and integrates. So the intention of this, we're still in the prayer, the intention of the healing session today is part 1 is to do some good, really useful, really genuine good for the world through energy healing. And number 2, to support everybody who's here to stabilize and integrate, to become more familiar with and comfortable with energy healing so you can use it for yourself. So you can use it for any situation that comes up. All right, thank you. That's the prayer. Thank you for being with me. All right. What is energy healing? Energy healing builds on the premise that all this is a divine interaction. All this field of creation is divinity interacting with its own nature. That's the fundamental premise. So all this is comprised of consciousness. It is consciousness, and our awareness is consciousness. So it goes to follow that with our awareness, we can affect the field. From the level of individual awareness, the field can be enlivened, supported, nourished, purified, etc. And this is a matter of focusing our awareness in a way which is uplifting and life-supporting. Oh, also a shout out to all the Europeans, because I think we have more Europeans with us today. Hey, the whole eastern part, east of the US. Thank you for being here. Yeah, so that's what energy healing is. We're focusing attention. But we need some tools to be able to do that in an intelligent and successful and useful manner. To do it, let's say, in a way which is aligned with the original divine intention, which is behind all that is, right? So the alignment principles are, number one, that awareness is none other than that source. Awareness is source energy, which we as human beings have this magical capacity to focus at will. One interesting note or interesting point about awareness is that it transcends all the relative laws of our universe. For instance, the physicists tell us that nothing in the universe can go faster than the speed of light. It takes 8 minutes for light to get from the sun to the earth. But awareness can be at the sun and back again instantly, faster than the speed of light. And awareness can travel through time as well. And awareness, based on principles like the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, the awareness has this wonderful, magical, fabulous ability to influence or affect that upon which it lands. And it is that ability of awareness, it's its flexibility where it can go anywhere, and then its ability to have an effect where it goes. It's that combination, which is, we're leveraging that in energy healing. We're leveraging that combination. All right. So we need a roadmap. And as I mentioned yesterday, any pair of opposites can be used as the points of reference to create a spectrum in between which awareness can flow. But really, really useful spectrum is the spectrum that ranges from the gross material, dense, relative level of creation to the subtle, absolute, unmanifest, quality-less source of creation. So there's a range in there. If we're using my screen as our imaginary grid, you've got the physical material up at the top and it goes down, finer, more abstract. And then it gets down to that source of creation, which is infinite abstraction. So we have a roadmap. We have our awareness that we can focus effortlessly. We have a roadmap. There are also some tools. Dharma. It's a fundamental tool. Because Dharma sustains the universe. Dharma is a Vedic word. My background is Vedic. Dharma sustains. And the word Dharma in Sanskrit doesn't really have an English correlate, nor do the 4 pillars of Dharma. Dharma has 4 pillars. And roughly translated into English, they are truth, compassion, purity, or like orderliness, and something that's like austerity or the ability to let go. Tapas, they call that one tapas. These 4 impulses of energy which sustain and support evolution, they align awareness with the evolutionary process, with that big overarching evolutionary process that divinity has already constructed. You could think of Dharma as our gateway to that field of divine intelligence, which is responsible for keeping the entire universe and all the galaxies and stars and everything moving about in a way which supports the evolutionary process, which supports evolution. So, Dharma. All right, those are basically the simple tools. They're more elaborate tools, and of course we talked yesterday about matrices and light medicines and things like that. And we'll probably downloads, we'll get into that today too. But for now, this is a basic overview of what this energy healing is. And I say this because there are a lot, there are a lot of different types of energy healing on the market today, right? There are people who play crystal bowls, and there are people who do, like, they channel beings, or they do divine prayer, or Reiki, or many different kinds. There's so many. We'd spend the rest of the webinar if I'm listing them all. So we don't need to, but I just wanted to define what we're doing here today so that it's clear for everyone what the thrust of today's session is. There's one other point really important about energy healing that directly relates to today's session, and that is that it's one thing for any one of us to do the energy healing on our own, but the power, efficiency, and richness of the results that we create through energy healing multiply exponentially when we come together as a group, which is why the idea to do Livestream was such a good one. Didn't come from me. It came from one of the folks on my live webinars, because we get together every 3 weeks. About, 1 to 200 of us get together every 3 weeks and do healing sessions. So anyway, yes, the idea came up, gee, why not do one on YouTube where we might be able to get like many hundreds more people, and in so doing, increase the power and the potency of our healing work. And of course, as soon as that idea came up, I was like, well, of course, what a great idea. So here we are. So we will be doing this energy healing together. Understand that your awareness alone, your awareness, is incredibly precious to this process. Last night I was comparing it to a flashlight with a lot of lumens, because my job is to be your humble servant. My job is to describe what's going on with the energy healing process from my perspective. But we put all our perspectives together and we get a very big, very amazing picture. So thank you all for adding your lumens. I appreciate it. Even those who watch this video after the fact, even then, because awareness is not bound by space-time, your awareness helps too. Everybody's awareness helps. We're doing this together. So we can continue watching and reviewing these healings for the coronavirus over the next weeks and months as we are continuing to aim toward a world free of disease. And review from yesterday, our species of humanity, to exist in this world in such a harmonious fashion that we also are able in the long term to remain free of disease. It is possible. It just hasn't been done yet, that's all. But we're coming into a new time, a really exciting time. I think all of us who are alive today have aimed our lives at this time of profound global transformation. It is the unification of intention and the awakening and expansion of consciousness, the integration of consciousness, which is now potentially available, is something which has been previously unprecedented. So I'm so grateful for everyone for joining me. Thank you. All right. So that's basically what is energy healing, and kind of like a little review of yesterday. Let's dive in now to today's session. And the principle here is we're just going to go in and we're going to start doing healing work for the coronavirus, for the pandemic, for the health of our human family. I was thinking today it might be good to do a little review of what exactly is this coronavirus. I know we've all been watching the news, so I think everybody's pretty clear what they think it is. They're pretty sure it is, but just so we're sort of all on the same page, I thought we could review it from the angle of what we know about it briefly, and then review it from the angle of energy healing, what we know about it from the angle of energy healing. So what we know about it from the angle of what we get from the media, and then from the angle of energy healing. And then we'll put these two together and see what we come up with. Because I don't have a plan for today's session. We're doing this together, you guys. So, all right. We know it's an infection that suffocates. It's an infection that suffocates. And we know that it's different from pneumonia. We talked about this yesterday. It's different from pneumonia because with pneumonia, the lungs fill up with liquids and the person can't like take in a breath. They can't take a breath in. Whereas with the coronavirus, evidently, it is possible for the individual to continue bringing air into their bodies. So people at the end of their lives are gasping for air and they're sucking a lot of air in, but they're not getting any oxygen. This is the difference between pneumonia and coronavirus. So at this point, from the public perspective and from the reports from the doctors who are on the front line, the feeling is that what's happening is it's less about weakness in the lungs and more about a problem with the blood, with red blood cells and the hemoglobin and the ability of the oxygen to get into the blood. That's where the problem seems to sit. Okay. There's also a lot more to know about it, right? I mean, we can just go to the news stations and see countless hours of information about it, like some people affected more than others and so forth and so on. But this is the basic premise of what is going on with the virus. All right. So what does it look like from the angle of energy healing? What does it look like energetically? Two things are coming to mind. One is a little bit review from yesterday, and that is that the blood and the oxygen in the blood are the flow of bliss in the body and in the being. And when we take a breath in, and we can just do this for a second, like a little exercise, we take a breath in. In is fullness. In is a feeling of fullness. And when we breathe out is a feeling of emptiness. So we have fullness and emptiness. And what happens is the fullness, that feeling of fullness, is created by the presence of the oxygen in the body. So the oxygen provides an experience of bliss and fullness. And carbon dioxide, which we're breathing out, represents, or it gives us the feeling of emptiness. And what evidently happens with coronavirus patients is that the body is not able to let go fully of all the CO2. And this is important because the oxygen and the CO2, the carbon dioxide, bind to the same hemoglobins in the red blood cells. So that means the hemoglobin is like a kind of a carrier. It carries oxygen into the cells, and then it carries the CO2 out. And so the same wheel cart, the same wheelbarrow is carrying in one direction oxygen, the other direction CO2. So what it means is when the CO2 gets into the wheelbarrow isn't able to let it go. It's not able to let it go. This junction between the oxygen coming in and the CO2 going out energetically represents the relationship between the flow of divinity coming in, right? The flow of the eternal, the universal, the cosmic coming in. Our bodies are receiving 2 billion bits of information every second from our environment, from our reality. So that part coming in is blocked by the part that comes out. And the part that comes out is coming from each cell in the body, right? So that's like the individual level of self, small ego, individuality, right? So what individuality has to offer back to the universe is being held. It's being held up. It's not going back to the universe for some reason. When I look at that, when I look at the emotional component, I see guilt, shame, embarrassment, remorse. I see feelings of I'm not good enough and what I have to give isn't really valuable. Feelings like that. Or, you know, how many of us are very concerned about caring for others and creating a positive effect in our environment. And therefore, if we feel angry or disturbed or anxious or upset, we tend to stuff those feelings in and hold them in instead of giving them out, right? Because we don't want to upset others, right? So there's kind of this is a fairly universal experience. Like lots of people experience this tendency to want to protect the environment by not giving what they have, especially if what we have internally is judged or deemed. There's some high expectations like, oh, well, I should just always be happy all the time, right? I should be happy and cheerful and giving all the time. And I should never be receiving, and I should never be angry, and I should never be blue or depressed or down or whatever. But the thing is, those darker sides of self are an expression of they're part of the mechanics of how we purify. They're part of the mechanics of purification. They really are. And if we take anger, which is such a deeply unpleasant emotion, she says, smiling. But anyway, if we take anger, we notice that anger has certain values that are not so bad. I mean, sure, it's uncomfortable, but anger is a tremendous powerhouse of energy, is it not? When anger comes by, it's like you're geared up. You're geared up to go. And anger always comes by when some larger mountain needs to be moved, when something needs to be affected or done or created, or healthy boundaries need to be set, or some big change is necessary. And anger comes in to provide the energy resource. If it can be administered with fine discrimination and measured regularity, it can, and when I say fine discrimination, I'm talking about the pillar of truth, the Dharma. Dharma stands on these 4 pillars, right? Sorry, it's choreographer's dyslexia. I get on this live stream because it's backwards. There we go. The pillar of truth. When truth comes in as a foundation, it sits under the anger. It allows the anger to come forward in a way which supports evolution, which supports growth, which supports good for everybody involved. Maybe somebody is being really annoying to you, and you need to put them a little bit in their place. If you bring putting them in their place with harshness and cruelty, then you may end up losing an important relationship. But if you bring it forward in truth, with the other pillars of Dharma, some compassion, right? In an orderly fashion. So it's not like I'm crazy here, but I'm just giving it to you straight, right? And willing to let go a little bit from your side, whatever you need to let go to make it happen. Then the anger comes forward and it helps you make a move that you needed to make. You needed to move forward on your evolution. And when you are able to bring it forward in that way, it helps the other person also move forward on their evolution. Because if they're being exploitative or leaning too much on you or having unreasonably high expectations on you, then that means they're not stepping up to the plate and doing their part. All right, so that was a bit of a digression into how to deal with anger, but which I've already talked about before for a lot of you. But this is important, that we're dealing with an effect in the human physiology of not wanting to let go of one's stuff, not wanting to allow one's own individual lessons to bubble up to the surface. And we're seeing this at a global level. We are seeing every country in the world, even though America leads the world in number of COVID-19 cases and number of deaths. We have, I believe, just passed Italy, a number of deaths. All the countries are lying. America's totally, excuse me, this may be considered rude, but we are underreporting. I'm just saying we're underreporting. Like literally, Iowa has, for like weeks, Iowa only had 90 tests. Like in the whole state for weeks, we only had 90 tests. Lots of people were getting sick, and the government's saying, well, don't go get tested. If you're sick, just stay home. You know, unless you think you're dying, then come in, then we might test you, right? So, you know, like I'm sure a lot of people were sick with the virus and they weren't tested, and so they're not in the statistics. A lot of countries are not telling how many people are sick, and that's just a fact. It's okay. It's the truth. It's coming out, the truth, with compassion and orderly, right? We can let go. It's all right. It's all right. So we're seeing this at a country level, at the level of the countries. Every country is so embarrassed about how they look in front of all the other countries that they're underreporting their results. Yeah. So this is one of the energies that's in COVID-19, and it's one of the energies that attracts the virus. And that's a small ego thing, right? That's my little individual. I want to look good in front of everybody else. That's a small ego. So it's not that ego's never a bad thing. Ego is not bad. We love ego. We can't live without ego. Ego is sense of self. But ego has this potential to become cosmic ego. It has the potential to expand to its fullest expression. It has the potential to expand to the point that it fully identifies with divine expression, with the source of creation, with universal being. And this brings me to a really interesting observation that I made. And here we're still kind of analyzing it, but this is an observation that I made. I was noticing about 2-3 weeks ago, maybe even 4 weeks ago. I was noticing the shift in the astral field. This is beyond the shift. It has to do with Uluru, which if you're interested in that, you can look. I've got 2 videos on that at least. Uluru, which is Ayers Rock. This is not that. This is something different. What I noticed is as soon as the virus started moving out of China and started going to other countries, I started noticing folds in the web of life. Like the web of life was kind of turning in on its own nature, kind of the way you would imagine protein folding. Like I haven't really explored protein folding heavily, but so I'm not a scientist or a medical doctor, so I don't know that much about it, but I understand that a lot of diseases are a byproduct of proteins that fold onto themselves in a way which is not normal or healthy. But I'm seeing that happening in the web of life. I'm seeing that now. Oh, where's the web of life? For all the new people, remember our map? Physical material up here all the way down to the source of creation down here. Well, the web of life resides at about this level right here. This is the astral level of the physiology. We talked about this a bit in yesterday's session. And you can find a blog on that on my knowledge base and lots of videos about it and so forth. So it's a very interesting part. It's a very interesting level of the field of consciousness, very interesting realm of the field of consciousness where awareness appears like threads. And so it's like a fabric. The web of life is like a fabric. It's also, when I use the word astral field, it means the same thing. Astral field, web of life, same thing. Astral body, your little web, right? Astral field, web of life is the collective. All right. It started folding in on itself and making these sort of compact, like knots. Now, the reason I'm bringing it up to all of you, all of my honored guests at today's webinar, all of us in our great, powerful healing collective, is because I've looked and looked and looked and looked and looked at this folding in the web of life. And I've looked, and then I go back to the silence of being, and I'm like, what is it? Why is it doing that? And then I look and back to silence and back and forth. And I've been kind of, massaging that relationship. And I have yet not gotten an answer that really, really satisfies me. The only answer that I came up with so far, so I'm giving you all the information I have about this, and then we're going to take a good look together, all of us with all of our lumens, we're going to take a good look at this and see what it is, because I think there is an answer here in the web of life. I really do. This is a deeper, more abstract level of analysis of what is happening in our collective consciousness, but that's where we need to go to find the seed of the imbalance, to find what's really causing it. All right, and I don't think the only thing that's really causing it is just small ego. I think it's something deeper than that. So anyway, the other point that I noticed was that because the web of life, because the astral field is like a thick multidimensional fabric, and it naturally ripples and turns. It does this. And when it ripples, it creates gradients. Like, imagine the fabric was this thick, okay? So it's like rippling and turning like that. All right. So when it turns this way, oh my God. It's exactly mirror image to me than it is for you. I'm having a little problem with that. Okay. So imagine, oh, there we go. I'll just look at myself. Okay. So imagine it turns this way. What it's going to do is it's going to create a gradient that goes that way, right? And then we imagine if it turns this way, there we go. But imagine it turns this way, it's going to create a gradient that goes that way. Does that make sense? I hope people are getting this. Like if you have a fabric and you bend it, it's going to be like wider at the top and thinner at the bottom. Now, the reason this is important is because consciousness flows from being, from the subtle, unmanifest, qualityless source of creation, through to the manifest level of creation, and then it flows from the manifest level of creation back to the source of creation. And this flow I call the divine dialogue, and this is divinity self-interacting, folding in on itself in order to promote evolution and in order to create the entire manifest universe. So when the web of life folds in this direction, the gradient goes that way. And what that does is it draws or pulls energy from source out to the surface. And when when the fabric goes this way, like it bends towards the absolute, we get the gradient going like that. And it draws our experience. It allows human experience, an experience from the relative level of creation, the experience of flowers, every experience. It allows that to reflect back into the source of creation in order for the source of creation to be enriched. When the web of life starts folding in on itself over and over and over again, it appears to clog up that process. That's what it looks like to me. When it makes too many folds all over itself, it makes like a knot. And then the flow from the absolute to the relative, or from the relative to the absolute, is hindered or obscured. Now, it's really interesting that that is happening, because just before COVID-19 hit, just before the web of life started doing this folding thing, it did something else that was really interesting. I just referenced it when I was talking about Uluru, is that a light started to shine into the subtle fabrics of consciousness globally that was lighting up a lot of material that had been previously camouflaged or obscured. There was a big light shining. Uluru is one of the earth chakras, and it started to flow. It opened up and it started to flow, and it created a really big, beautiful gradient going this direction, right? So lots of pure being energy was radiating out from the source of creation through that chakra, through that earth chakra, and it was showing all kinds of stuff. And it was showing a lot of stuff that needed to be purified, that needed to be cleared, that needed to be healed. And it was fabulous. I was just having a energy healer's heyday over here. It was like, oh, this needs to be, healed, and this needs to be. And how we do it, we just focus our attention and we drop the awareness into the source of creation. And the source of creation starts issuing forth all kinds of solutions and remedies and shifts and transformations in the energy field, which form a foundation for big, really useful, valuable changes at the surface. And I do see the resetting of our world based on everyone going into all the self-isolation and all the businesses closing down and everything, pulling back from that sort of outward stroke of activity to an inward stroke of activity as part of the solution, which has evolved from the presence of the virus. That the virus bubbling up to the surface is the purification coming out to the surface. The problem is, like an explosion of uncontrolled anger, it's having a destructive effect. And it feels as if what we need to offer is an orderly emergence, an orderly bubbling to the surface, an orderly coming forth of the purification in a way which will be more life-supporting. That's what it seems like. However, that's just through Dorothy's filter. I think what I'd like to do now is something that I did yesterday, but I did it a little earlier yesterday, but it was so juicy, it was so luscious. And that was, we took just a couple minutes of silence, all of us, pure silence of absolute being together as a collective, because our individual connections to the source of creation, then we bring them all together as a group. That experience is a foundation for drawing up the deepest, most profound, most pure values of truth, for coming forth with all the resources that we need to actually do this in the most effective way. It's not up to Dorothy's individuality, even though I'm the reporter over here. It's really what we're really doing isn't happening at the surface level. What we are doing as a healing collective is happening at a very, very abstract, very profound level, at the level of our consciousness, which is the foundation of all that is. So let's just take, for those of you who are used to dipping awareness, dipping your toes into the field of absolute silence, this is going to be such a yummy, sweet, luscious, magnificent moment. For those who aren't, it won't last too long. I won't keep you too long, even though from my side, I'm like, oh, I could sit here forever. But we'll just take just a couple minutes, like 2 to 3 minutes, and then we'll come out and see what comes with us. See what level of divine wisdom and resource and knowledge comes. Yes. Yep. Looks like in the comments, Alicia Stewart got it. You got the connection, dear, from between what's going on the level of divine interaction and what's going on with the virus. Absolutely perfect. All right, let's close our eyes. take a minute and then slowly open the eyes. Thank you, everyone, for bearing with me through the silence and for adding your beautiful, beautiful silence. It's so refreshing, isn't it? It's like what we were doing as a collective is kind of what the earth is doing right now. It's like turning the computer off and on, you know. And doing a reset. We're able to do a reset by going into the silence and refreshing our being. And what I noticed when I was in the silence was that this increased light in the subtle levels of creation found its way to the individuals. At first, when it started flowing out of the earth chakra in Australia, it was lighting up big swaths of the field of the collective consciousness of humanity, big areas, big, like big cultural conditions and things that were not aligned with natural law that needed attention. But what I'm seeing is that light has sort of filtered its way down to an individual level. And as it filtered its way down to an individual level, a lot of people started having to deal with their stuff. People start to deal with their stuff. And I think that what I'm noticing is that in our culture, in our society, we don't have a lot of really good systems set up for dealing with our stuff. Our culture, for at least 12,000 years, has supported dealing with our stuff by running away from it. And the whole field around us supports that. There's every distraction you can possibly imagine available. If there's something you don't want to deal with, you bet your friends and buddies will come in and help you not deal with it, right? Because that's just the way. This comment coming in from one of our beautiful meditation teachers is that love and honor. And when we talk about love and honor, we're talking about the compassion leg of the Dharma, right? Because the Dharma, I think I'll do it on the side. Dharma has these 4 pillars, and then compassion is one of them. And love is like, remember I was saying, like, these 4 pillars, they don't really have an English correlate. So they're kind of like broad concepts that are in those ranges. So I used the word originally compassion, but absolutely love and honor is part of that. But in this time that we're in, these 3 legs or these 3 pillars of Dharma are not fully stable. Only the leg of truth is stable. So the 3, compassion being one of them, you can't lean 100% on it. And definitely when we went into our silence, the first thing I noticed was awakening of the heart, and was a flow of compassion and concern. I felt genuine concern from our collective for all the world and all the individuals affected by this, people we know, people we don't know, all the workers and everybody. So the compassion is there, but somehow the compassion has to be applied, or it has to be administered with such a nice big dose of knowledge that it produces an efficient effect for all those individuals concerned. And I mean, mostly what we're doing here is we're focusing our healing efforts on those individuals who are most vulnerable, or be most directly affected. And that could include family members who've lost their family and so forth, or who have the potential to lose a family member. So the love and compassion goes in and it softens the junction between individual and collective ego. It softens, and I feel as I'm looking that our collective is broad enough and is profound enough that as that compassion starts to move in with knowledge, and I just trust that the pure truth that's coming through each one of you is directing that compassion in the most efficient way. What I'm seeing is some members of our healing collective are really adept at focusing the love and honor and compassion into the fine places where the individual ego and cosmic ego interface, like all the way down to the hemoglobin in the blood. Whereas other members are able to focus out into the larger field of the collective, into the web of life, where the web of life is folded. It's like gotten too overly folded on itself, like a protein that folds too much. Don't be surprised, everyone, when the final understanding of coronavirus emerges, that protein folding is a factor. Don't be surprised. Because I personally feel that there is a relationship between this new understanding that proteins that overfold themselves contribute to diseases like Parkinson's and other of the types of underlying conditions that can make a person extra vulnerable to COVID-19 as well. But when the web of life is a little bit less anxiety struck, when it's a little bit less pressured, it's not folding so heavily in on itself, then it acts more like if you take a sheet or a blanket and you put it out over your bed like that, and it opens up like that. When the web of life opens up, then awareness flows in a more comfortable manner through the web of life. It's able to flow even more frictionlessly. And the gradients produced by the web of life are cleaner. They allow the flow of divinity from source to the surface, from surface to the source, to occur in a more natural and frictionless manner. And it's the frictionless flow of that intelligence, that pure divine material, pure awareness, pure perception, pure consciousness, pure amness, pure knowingness, from source to the surface and back again. It's that which massages the relationship between individual ego and collective ego. Oh, bingo. We're finding our way in. Yeah, beautiful. I'm checking in the comments just a little bit too, because the point about first we experience internally, then we experience in the collective is an absolutely beautiful insight. And sorry, I can't read all of them because I have to talk to you guys too. I could just sit here reading comments. The point is that our little human physiologies can act as beautiful reflectors or mirrors of the entire cosmic reality. So when we are say we're sitting with someone who isn't feeling well, say at this moment our healing collective is sitting with the body of individuals who are either sick with COVID-19 or have the potential to become very critically ill with COVID-19. We are sitting with them. Our little physiologies can be like a mirror that shows what they're experiencing. And within our own little mirror, we produce that impulse of creative intelligence. In this case, the compassion, those values, those compassionate values, we create them in such a way that they are able to activate for those sick individuals or those who may later become ill, activate their healing potential. So this is leveraging the imbalance or the destructive laws of nature which are functioning in the physiologies, leveraging that to produce an antidote, to produce the opposite effect. One of the great healing experiences which arises from energy healing is when we activate or enliven our own angelic energies. And I've talked a lot about, oh gosh, where am I here? I've talked a lot about the astral level of the, let's do it on this side. I've talked a lot about the astral level of creation, but just underneath that, at even a finer level, is the causal body. And the causal body, I talked a little bit yesterday, like an ocean with regions. And each of the regions vibrates or hums with different energy frequencies. We can say with different laws of nature. That the laws of nature and the fine, like Davic intelligence of creation, those structures that are responsible for manifestations at the surface are born of the resonations that are propagated through the regions of the causal body. Oh, that was such a mouthful. Maybe better go check my knowledge base post on the causal body if you like more information or lots of videos on that. But in the short version is when we experience energy that feels like the presence of an angel, we are experiencing divine intelligence, source material, humming through a specific region of our causal bodies. That region which has this exact form and exact structure that allows that divine, pure potential of divine being to come through in a way which promotes that angelic energy. And I really sincerely feel that the fact that this is coming up now, it's coming out, it's born out of that compassion leg of Dharma. This is one of the beautiful things. We're putting the compassion leg together with the truth leg, right? With the knowledge leg. And what we're getting is, oh, if we put compassion together with knowledge, we get a value which has both the wisdom to make the right choices and the right decisions and to move awareness in a way which is really useful and in also very loving and the compassion allows that truth to find its way into the people that need it, because the compassion softens, right? The love and the honor softens the flow of the consciousness, and then individuals can receive it. They're like, I was in the hospital and I felt like I was dying, and then I felt as if the presence of an angel was with me. And I felt so safe and I felt loved. And the angel said, you're going to be okay. You're going to survive. It's going to be okay. And right then I started getting better, right? These stories happen. These are the stories that are happening now. These are the stories that can happen for all of us. But these are the stories that are also, they're nurtured. They're nurtured and they're fed and they're awakened and they're enlivened through our collective awareness of the mechanics, the underlying mechanics of consciousness that are actually behind those experiences. If we think of the angels as somebody out there, somebody separate from me, somebody that I may never see again or something like that, then we've put our own personal autonomy and the ability to reproduce the experience, the ability to bring the experience forth at any time. We've put that away from ourselves. And the whole story of integrating individual ego with cosmic ego is one of being willing to take responsibility for one's divine power, for one's divine capabilities, we could say. Maybe power is a little too, that word maybe carries too many other connotations, but we could say our divine responsibility and privilege to our divine capability. It puts life on a different level. It puts life on a level where the possibility of running away from a problem isn't really a viable option. That's what it does. That's what you give up. That's the letting go leg of Dharma, right? Well, what are we giving up? We're giving up the option to say, oh, I'm just going to bury my head in the sand and I'm not going to look at that problem. We give up that option. When ego expands to the point that it is cosmic ego and we own the laws of nature. We are the laws of nature. You are the angels. You are the Devata. You are the laws of nature. You are all these forms and phenomena of creation. Your body is the little sensitive antenna of the universe, and the whole universe is you. I am you. I am you, and you are me. We are all. It is such a privilege. It is such a privilege to reflect. And it is such a privilege to have you as my reflection. Thank you for being with me. So, yeah, this is what's happening, is that the junction between individual ego and cosmic ego is opening up. And I think there's a vast amount of fear. Oh, that's what's causing the folds in the web of life. Oh, isn't it nice when all the pieces of the puzzle start clicking into place? Yes, the fear is causing the web of life to start folding in on its own nature and buckle. It's causing it to buckle a bit. And the fear is the fear of not having that resource. There's a fear of, yeah, but I want to be able to hide my head in the sand. I want to be able to run away from my problems. I want to get drunk and not think about anything. It's not an option. Have you seen the news? Alcohol makes COVID-19 worse. Marijuana makes COVID-19 worse. Smoking makes COVID-19 worse. Mental health problems make COVID-19 worse. Diabetes, which is basically born of an eating disorder, and eating, may I point out, is one of the ways we avoid dealing with problems. Eating, it's a little bit less obvious than drinking alcohol, but let's say you have some difficult emotional situation you have to deal with. If you eat a heavy food, I know this from experience, you guys, I've done this. If you eat a heavy food that takes a lot of energy to metabolize, so much of the body's resource goes into metabolizing that heavy food, like something, oily and sweet or something like that. So much body's resource is busy metabolizing the food that the resource is no longer available to deal with the emotional discord. You can avoid it. You can avoid it simply by eating a lot of food or eating something heavy. And if you keep your stomach full all the time, you never have to deal with it. And then we find, people who are obese have a much higher possibility of having critical effects from the coronavirus. See the connection? There are connections there, aren't there? As we make the connections, with our awareness, we make the connections. We are making the connections not just for ourselves. We're making them for the collective of our human family. And as we make these connections, carried on the wings of love and reverence and devotion and respect and compassion and empathy and mercy to all those people who are suffering now from this virus, as soon as they're suffering, they start to let go. They're like, oh, I was really holding on to that, but you know what? I'm ready to let go of it now. Suffering, pain is a great motivator to get a person to start putting the possibility of facing your own death. All of a sudden things just go, priorities start falling into place, right? So people are in a position right now, the masses are in a position right now to comfortably, gracefully, willingly let go of attachments. Oh, and look, the attachments are in the astral body. Oh, how about that? Astral through looks like also up through physical. That entire range of our roadmap from astral all the way up to the physical, we're looking at people having attachments to all those techniques or substances or whatever it is that they use to avoid having to deal with problems. This brings up another really important point, and that is, as human beings, we're really only wired to deal with one problem at a time, right? Because of our nervous systems, we experience life as a sequential unfoldment of moments, sequentially unfolding experiences in the now, right? So as a result, we're really only wired to deal with one problem at a time, really. So our systems are designed to put some lessons on ice while we're lighting a fire under other lessons. And that's just natural and normal. But what's happened is some imbalance or corruption has crept into that system. And it's all the fine mechanics that allow us to put the harder lessons on hold until our consciousness is big enough to handle them, right? To put them on hold, those mechanics are being applied to lessons that need to open up now. That's the difference. And then the person's like, if I could just go through my life and everything could just stay the same and I never learn any new lessons ever, that would be so nice. And everything would get done for me and I wouldn't have to do anything. But but the thing is, it's not our individual us doing, it's divine being doing. And divine being gets this huge pleasure out of the expansion of our consciousness. When we learn new things, when we have new experiences, when we become more of what we are, this satisfies Dharma. It satisfies the Dharma of humanity. Why are there even humans at all in the first place? Like, why would God make a human of all things, right? Because we're wired up in such a way that we learn one lesson at a time. And when we do, we keep having these experiences of, oh, I get it. Now I'm smarter. Now I go into my little honeymoon phase, like I've got this new piece of information. And I'm going along and like, oh, if my life could just stay like this forever. But then another lesson crops up, right? And we go through that lesson. And then we're like, oh, I see I'm bigger now, smarter. So each time consciousness expands. And then each time we have the capacity to deal with yet a more challenging lesson. So we have to put the extra challenging lessons on ice while we're dealing with the one that's at the level that we can handle. Part of the problem there is a collectively held belief. So we're coming back to our COVID-19 here. Collectively held belief that I do not have the capability, I do not have the resources, I do not have the autonomy or the authority even to do what I need to do in this situation. Long patterns of giving our power away to authority figures, right? Long patterns of denying our connection to the source of creation, which is an infinite resource of energy, intelligence, creativity, and everything we need to deal with our problems. So if we're like, well, God is up there in heaven, the big judgmental, like judging us and having expectations, and we are little pathetic sinners down here on earth, then of course we don't have access to all that resource. But through suffering in some form or another, right? But the answer comes forward, and I'm feeling like I want to be also something. I need to check some of the comments coming in, just letting you guys know. I'm going to stop in a second and check comments. But when the connection is made, and it's not made in a way, we're clearing fear. What causes that fear? What causes a person to give their personal autonomy, their personal power, their authority over themselves away to some expert or somebody else? Is that not wanting to take responsibility, essentially. But what better time to take responsibility when your life is on the line? May as well. Nothing to lose. Nothing to lose. And you find that the consciousness can and will expand to meet that lesson. Right. Okay, so one lady is bringing up the point that compassion, the Buddhist word for compassion is karuna, and actually the Vedic words for these are satya is truth, karuna is compassion. So it's very the same Vedic roots. Sattva is truth or orderliness, or is orderliness and purity, sattva, purity, and tapas is like doing your austerities. Yes. Okay, so this is a really interesting point from a lady who's a shaman. She says she's perceiving something about a partnership in each person between earth and higher vibrations being prepped for this in our bodies. More and more ready, yes, and coming on board as Corona moves in the collective. Yes, I definitely feel that anytime, and this is a really common pattern, we'll see it over and over again, this is how nature functions, is that there'll be a big purification, which is what the illness basically is. It's representing a huge purification, a huge transformation. And then we come into, and I just alluded to it slightly at the beginning of today's session, that we've spent our lives waiting for this transformation. It is just huge. It is just huge. That the potential for humanity to rise up physically, to become, for our bodies to become more perfect expressions and reflections of that divine source, it requires like a thorn to remove a thorn. Like it takes a thorn to remove a thorn. And the coronavirus is a kind of thorn that comes into the body, and it's poking at the junction in the body where the oxygen and the carbon dioxide share a vehicle. It's right there on that spot where what I receive from the divine source is sharing a space in the vehicle. It's sharing a seat in the car, you could say, with what I produce and give and promote through myself. If I am ever constantly running away from every lesson, then of course what I'm producing and promoting is something that I feel a little embarrassed about in the long run, although I'm probably running away from that feeling too, so I'm just kind of dulled out. That's what a lot of people are experiencing. And so now the healing is to lovingly, gently, in a nurturing way that's really, really, really comfortable for everyone, drawing upon each person's own angelic capacity, their own angelic potential, to allow each person to open up a relationship, partnership with their cosmic reality, so that access to all the resources for dealing with crazy, wild problems are available, and that access is balanced. That was what we needed. We need balance, and balance needs to go into the hemoglobin so that the carbon dioxide doesn't stay stuck. Balance comes out of the causal body, right? There's a region of the causal body which hums or hones in on that value of balance and creates balance as a law of nature, which can then propagate up through the denser levels of physiology to allow people to allow the physiology to feel even, to experience evenness in the face of pleasure and pain, to experience evenness, to hold a witnessing position, whether we're dealing with something that is absolutely horrible or we're dealing with something which is absolutely wonderful. Because when evenness is maintained, then the carbon dioxide can be released. And there's no feeling or sense of I'm a bad person because of it, or oh gosh, all my weakness is showing. The country should just be honest. They should just report how many cases there are. They should do lots of testing, find out how many cases there are, and just be honest. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Because we're in this together. It's no longer, it's like my country against their country. It's a world family. I keep hearing the word propaganda and how one reacts to that word, creating conflict of what is true and what is deliberately disguised, making space for the virus to sneak in unnoticed. Here we're a little bit referencing oh boy, lots of good questions here. Here we're a little bit referencing, this is a bit of a rat's nest, is the whole propaganda thing, because there's a spectrum here. There's a spectrum between people who are very, very objective and just, what the media is telling us is just what it is, and this is what it is, and we take it at face value, and this is what it is. And the other side that says, oh no, there's this like whole other agenda. So that could be like, we could do a whole webinar just on that, because that's a whole thing. But my personal take on it is that anytime we're looking at a spectrum that's really wide, our job is to find the balance point. Because the more perfectly we align our consciousness, attune our consciousness with the point of perfect balance between the two opposing ends, the better we access divine being within ourselves, because divine source is a space of absolutely perfect balance. And also then we can look out and we can see that all the players, the media, the medical establishment, the government, the wealthy elite, if you will, the other countries, the leaders of other countries, the virus, all the players, the people who know they're sick with coronavirus and go out in public to spread it around intentionally. All these players, they're all acting according to their own nature. They're just acting according to their own nature. And the synergy of that action gives rise to specific effects, but we have to be very careful. When we're in the balance point, we are in the point of our ultimate power. And from that point, we can align with the virtual future, right? Because we've got all these players and they're all acting from their own nature. We align with that future scenario, which best reflects divinity, whatever that is, which best reflects divine intelligence, which best reflects the intentions of the source of creation. And that thread has a feel to it. You can identify it. Download for everyone in our session. The feel is your pure potential. You came into this world with that feel. You were born. The initiation of your presence, of the presence of your body on earth as a human, was carried forth by that feeling, your pure potential. And your pure potential will guide all the natures of all the players in such a way, because by aligning, and we aligning, and as our collective, offering that vision of the pure potential as it appears from each person's individual point of perspective. So this is what our healing collective can do that individual healers cannot do. This is our power as a healing collective, is to offer that impulse of pure potential to our human family, to our human collective, as the blueprint for moving forward, is the blueprint for healing that body. It's the blueprint for living a quality of life which is aligned, so well aligned with your individual and cosmic evolution, that every single challenge, every puzzle, every experience, every conundrum, every difficulty results in you just moving forward in that alignment even more solidly, even more solid evolution. Doesn't matter what it is. This is what we do. This is what we are doing. This is why I value you. This is why I can't do this without you. This is why I adore you. This is why we have this live stream. I'm looking at our time. Amazingly, we are exactly there. But there's just a few comments. Don't write any more comments. No, just kidding. You can write as many as you want. I love you. Sometimes angels have a human form. Sometimes when we have aligned so concisely with our own divine potential, we become angels in human forms. And yes, this is a big universe. Yes, abstract forms of creation can manifest, yes, but angels, when they manifest in human, that's a great comment. I could talk a lot about this. I have blogs on this too. You can look up Dorothy Angels and Dorothy Rowe Angels and stuff, knowledge base, YouTube videos, etc. But in cases, and I've read some phenomenal, amazing cases of where multiple witnesses saw an angel come in some like crazy difficult thing where someone was, trapped in a car that had collided and so forth. This in human form is still that person's, the person for whom the angel arrived, okay? The person who's in critical condition or having a problem. That person's own angelic reality was able to move in such a way to manifest another form, another material form, because our angels are our future self. Think about yourself in 1,000,000 years. Do you have the power to manifest in a simple little old human form? Of course you do. Do you have the power to move through space and time without restriction? Of course you do. Do you know how to manipulate the laws of nature, which you're already learning to do now? Of course you do. So if in this lifetime you're trapped in a car and your spine is broken, and you literally are meant to go forward in this life and continue working and do something great in this world, and you know it, then you will come forward as your own angelic forms to do what is necessary to reacquaint your life blueprint with Dharma, with your future, the future that you are meant to live, so that you are living a future where life is an expression of Source and satisfies. Ooh, angels are a very interesting topic, aren't they? Yep, stop running away from problems. The to-do list seems pretty long. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's make it simple. Fold awareness in on its own nature, and it will arrive at the source of creation and recognize itself as the source. Recognize itself as pure source energy. That's the fundamental. It's behind everything else. Yeah, when it bubbles out to the surface, it goes this way, that way. But the bottom line is, and that's why we took that minute of silence around, about 40 minutes ago, was because it's that silence is the foundation for all of this. That's the source of creation. That's the divine administrator. That's it. Oh, thank you, everybody. You are beautiful. Thank you all for being with me. Thank you for all the pretty emojis and for all the thank yous. Yeah, it's been beautiful. I won't keep you longer. We all have busy things to do, but thank you all for being with me. It's been amazing. And as I said, I adore you all. And I feel like the work that we do together is just priceless. It's absolutely precious. And it can only be done, as far as I know, as far as my experiences, this is the only way that we have to do this work, is through our collective intention together to really do it at this level of power. So, God bless you all. God bless you all, and thank you all. May our connection continue to be strong and as needed. May we as a healing collective continue to rise forth and to help all the people who are struggling in all the countries that are struggling. And may this coronavirus be healed very, very quickly. May we flatten the curve, and may the numbers be far less than anyone was ever expecting. And may all of humanity rise to a higher level of divine expression so that our bodies are incredibly strong, our immune systems are incredibly strong, that we can handle all sorts of challenges, problems, and situations with absolute grace and in a way which is good for us and is good for everybody else. All right, thank you. Much love to everybody. I'm going to end the stream now. Bye. Hope to see you all again soon. Bye.